So if you know me a little bit, I come from a family of storytellers. Sometimes elaborate, overly needed, lengthy storytelling, depending on which relative you talk to. Some of them are true. Most of them are true. Some of them are not true. Although we'd like you to believe that they are not true, or they are true. We have these stories that we just like to tell because we just enjoy that. I've got an uncle who would tell stories and he would get in trouble because you could never tell if he was telling the truth or not. So you kind of just didn't know. You're like, oh, this is a really good story. I'm really into it. But are you lying to me? And you can never tell until the very end. You'd start to look for in things that were, no, that's right. Pigs can't fly. He's making this up. Okay, now we're going to enjoy this story more. And I remember this instance so well with my grandpa. He was telling me a story, and I just couldn't tell if this is real or not. I was like, is he trying to sell me something because he enjoys telling stories? Or is he actually telling me something that's so unbelievable that he just has to share it with someone? You guys have those stories where you're just like, hey, no one's going to believe me, but I have to tell you this story. And he's telling me this about, he was driving a tractor for a guy, he was retired, and he was pulling this long road plow behind him, and he was going down the road to the next field, and there's all these construction cones, those tall, pointy orange ones, right? You've all seen them. We live in Minnesota. There's a whole season for this, right? And he was driving along, and he was watching his mirrors to make sure he didn't knock all of them over as he was going to the next field. And he caught one on the last digger of the plow, and he was telling me how the cone bent over, and as he passed up, the cone flipped in the air 6 times and then landed on the cone next to it, perfectly stacked. And I'm like, sure. Sure, and he's at this age where you just kind of listen, right? You don't ever correct someone that old, right? You're like, yep, whatever you say, Grandpa, I'm sure that happened. I'll tell everyone about it. My grandpa's the coolest, tractor driver ever. That's great. No, that's just, yeah, okay, whatever. But is it believable? Maybe, maybe not. Is it believable? Okay, we'll get into some of this stuff. But does he believe it's true? Yeah. There's a difference between belief and believability, isn't there? Well, they're the same word, Joel. Well, no, they are, but they mean totally different things. Is it believable? Not really. But do unbelievable things happen all the time? Yeah. Yeah, they do. And that's what is the foundation for belief. Because at some level in who we are, we have to throw our faith at something. We have to start with some foundation somewhere of this is what I believe and this is where I'm standing. Even if you think this is ridiculous, even if you think this isn't believable, this is where I'm at. Because this is what's proven to be true. Even if you don't think it's true, this is what is true. Because we're getting through, there's all sorts of stories in the Bible that are that way, where it's like, okay, does that really, we kind of have that question in the back of our heads, did that really happen? And we could try to make excuses and try to make things up and say, well, if maybe this happened and there was a glare in your eye, you didn't quite see it right. We're going to get into one of those stories today where people always just want to try to get around what the Bible actually says, to get around what God is actually doing. And to be honest, I'm really frustrated with this. Because I'm reading things on this and all sorts of different people's opinion on this, and I'm just getting upset. And I'm just getting frustrated with people who are trying to excuse their way around what God is doing. They're just trying to make anything up to just, instead of actually believing what it says. And instead of actually going back to believing who God is. Because that's the foundation of where I start. Is God who He is? Yes. Then what I believe about Him is what He says. We'll get there. Okay, we'll get there. So Joshua chapter 10. As soon as Adoni-Zedek, right? Fun name, right? King of Jerusalem, heard how Joshua had captured Ai and had devoted to destruction, doing to Ai and its king as he has done to Jericho and its king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of a flashback to where we were 2-3 weeks ago. Joshua and the people of Israel are working their way through the land of Israel that God has promised to give them. They've conquered Jericho in chapter 6. They conquered Ai in chapters 7 and 8. And now last 2-3 weeks ago, John talked about the Gibeonite deception. where there's this group of people from a town called Gibeon, and they kind of tricked Israel into making a covenant with them. And it's this long, if you go back and read chapter 9, they tricked him, and now they're aligned with Israel. And so now there's these other kings in the southern land of Israel who see what's going on. It says he has heard how Joshua has already captured all these places. He's heard what God is doing. This is going back to Joshua chapter 1, 2, all the beginning chapters, going back to Exodus, saying, I will give you this land, and the people of this land will melt before you because of the fear of who God is. They will hear about him. They continue to see how great this God is, that they are handing these mighty victories to these people of Israel. And so now this king, Adoni-Zedek, and there's a whole bunch of other fancy names in here. We won't call them funny names. They're all kings of southern Israel. And they're about to go through and they're going to conquer the rest of Israel because this is the land that God has given to them. So what has happened so far is, if you imagine Israel, they've gone right in the middle. They've gone right here. Okay? So they've cut a line straight through it. So now you can go north or you can go south. Well, they're going to go south. And they're going to go south because what's about to happen? Okay, so Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, and maybe you're thinking, wait a second, Joel, wait a second. Isn't Jerusalem a good thing? Don't we like Jerusalem? Isn't that where Jesus did all his stuff? Yes. But also at this point in time, it is not a city of Israel. It's a city of the Amorites. It's a city of the people of the land. It's a city of Adoni-Zedek, which is actually a blatant name in the face of who God is. Because the name means, I am the king of righteousness. Well, we know that he's not the king of righteousness. We know that Jesus is the king of righteousness. So there is absolute against what is going on in Israel. They are against what God is doing. And so he sees what Israel's up to. He sees he's conquered Ai. He sees he's conquered Jericho, mighty cities, and he's starting to get a little nervous because all of a sudden now Gibeon's allied with Israel. Oh man, these people are going to come in and just wipe the rest of us out. Like, I don't know if we have a chance. We're going to have to maybe, he's trying to be a little proactive. He doesn't want to just sit there and wait for Israel to come and destroy him. He's like, you know what? We got to do something. We got to get together. Verse 2, he says, he feared greatly because Gibeon was a great city, like one of the royal cities. And because it was greater than Ai, all its men were warriors. So Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, sent to Hoham, king of Hebron, to Piram, king of Jarmuth, to see, I'm wrestling through these fancy names. Okay, you read them. You read along. Japhia and Debir and Eglon, and he says, hey, come to me and help me. Let's all ally together. There's 5 kings coming up. Let's all get together and let's go strike Gibeon. Let's go get the other city that Israel just aligned themselves with. Let's go get him. Because if we can take back that, maybe we have a strategical chance. Maybe he's thinking, military strategy. And he's like, maybe if we do this and we get a bunch of allies, then maybe we'll be strong enough to stand against this mighty Israel who's coming in and doing damage. Maybe then we'll have an opportunity to move on them. So then the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, Eglon, gathered their forces and went up with their armies and encamped against Gibeon and made war against them. Okay, so now we have an offensive attack. Southern Israel is uniting together to go attack the city of Gibeon. Okay, not good, not good. Okay, we'll get to this in a second. We got to move some of this first part in a little bit. And the men of Gibeon, this is verse 6, sent to Joshua at the camp in Gilgal, saying, do not relax your hand from your servants. Remember what happens? Gibeon says they kind of tricked Israel into being a covenant with them, and they kind of find out, and then Joshua's like, hey, you're going to be my servants. Yes, we'll be your servants. So they're the woodcutters, they're the stone cutters of Israel. They're the servants of Israel. And here we have the 5 kings moving up to attack them. So they sent a messenger to Israel saying, hey, where are you? We are being attacked. We are being pressed. Are we not your servants? Are we not your allies? Do you not want us to be a part of this? Come help us. So now they've kind of gotten themselves in a little bit of a jam. Israel is coming in trying to conquer the entire land because it's the land of Israel. It's the promised land. It's the land that God has given them. but now they have to come and save Gibeon. But here's what I think is so fascinating, because we can get into the details of this, we can get into the why did this happen, and you can start thinking militarily about this and the strategy. But what I love about all this is that God is who God is. And this is what I get so frustrated when I talk with people, because people like the idea of God more than they actually like God. We're really interested in what we think religion is. We're really interested in what we think Jesus is. We really like the idea of not going to hell. We like the idea of being in heaven. We like the idea of having morals and rights. We like the idea of that. But then we start reading further along, we're just like, oh, but I don't like, that makes me a little uncomfortable. Well, maybe, we just kind of read it to read it. And we're like, well, okay, that's fine. But I'm still trying really hard. I'm still doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Okay, maybe I got to give myself a little bit more grace. And we start to, instead of starting with who God is, we start with who we think God is, and we try to add pieces in. Okay, maybe I'll give him a little bit more grace. Okay, maybe I'll give him a little bit less angry God. Maybe I'll give him a little, and see how we just add ideas to what we think God is. But no matter who we are, no matter how much we try to make the pieces of God fit together in a way that we think who God is, it will never be right. Because if I can imagine God, that's not God. I want a God I can't comprehend. I want a God who is beyond my understanding. I want a God who I can't ever fully, truly fathom the depths of, because that's a God who can control the universe. That's a God who can speak things into motion. That's a God who controls and allows us to breathe and move and have our being. That's a God who is for us and in us, not just something else, not just this force in the world. Because I feel like when I talk to people, and for years, even as my own idea of who God is, I'm like, well, that's just the goodness of the world as I'm trying to live in the world. If we really come down to it. No, there's so much more than just this idea of who God is. You look at Paul in Ephesians, he says, I'm praying that you would understand the height, the depth, and the love, and the width of the love of God. And Paul is sending a letter to the Ephesians church saying, I want you to understand that when you try to think about who God is, that you will never understand him. I want you to understand that you can't understand. Think about that. What you think of who God is isn't enough. And then you think, oh man, that just blew my box open. Okay, now where you are, that isn't enough. Oh man, that just blew my box open. And there, it isn't enough. And it goes on and on and on and on. It's never big enough. It's never strong enough. It's never enough grace. It's never enough love. It's never enough justice. It's always God is more than we can think or comprehend. The idea of God isn't enough. We as Christians have the privilege and the great joy of knowing him. Of knowing him because he has revealed himself to us. Not because I am so smart, not because I can figure things out, because God said, I want to make myself known to you. That's huge. It's a huge change. Don't settle for the idea of things, because our idea of God is too small. And it's never enough, and it's never quite right. But what the Bible speaks to us, what who God is and who he is amazingly huge. And that's what's going on here. He's about to change the direction of this. Did Israel do something that's kind of not right? Did they make a covenant with someone they weren't supposed to? Kind of. But God's going to take it and make it something so much more, so much better. He's going to do something that I don't even think Joshua in his fully comprehended mind would ever even thought of this idea. It's you read these other verses like in Habakkuk where God says, even if I told you what I was going to do, you wouldn't believe it. Belief and believability. What God is going to do is unbelievable, but because of the belief in him, it's going to happen. That's pretty incredible. God trumps what we think is unbelievable. God is bigger than what we think could or might happen. And so Joshua, verse 7, he went up from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said to Joshua, do not fear them, for I have given them into your hands. Not a man of them shall stand before you. That's got to be confident building. To go up before we're marching and we're getting up there and God's like, oh, by the way, all of them are going to be wiped out. I'm going to give every single one of them into your hands. Don't worry. Okay, well, I like that. That's pretty confident. But you have to think of the obedience and the step of faith that Joshua made before this. They're already moving. They're already going up to battle. They're already on their way. They are already walking in the obedience that God is who he says he is. They're not waiting to say, well, if God does this, then I'll be like, yeah, I'm all in. He's like, I'm following where God is going, and he's going to come through in some way that I don't even necessarily know. You see the difference in faith there? Do I have faith that God can do it, or do I have faith that God is doing it? Because as Christians, so often I want to be passive. I want to not jump until I know there's a rock there, until I can see it, until I have put weight on it, until I know it's there, until I know when I land that God is going to take care of everything, and that's the rock I'm supposed to step on. It's not the one over there, not that I'm missing this. I want to know that this is where I'm going to go. That this is what God has ordained, that he's already told me, Joel, take your right foot and move it 3 feet to the right. Therefore, you shall do everything I say, to me be the glory. Amen. That's what we want in the Bible, right? That book could be really long. What if God is already doing something and I'm like, God, I'm following you into this because I know that you are in charge of this? Do we believe that God is in charge of everything? Do we really believe that? I came to this thought really in the last year or two. I've really had to ask myself this question. Do I believe that God is in control of everything? Well, the Sunday school answer in me says yes. But then you get into the world and you start looking at things and you're like, does God really do this? And does God really do this? And we kind of just push those thoughts off to the side because we don't really want to deal with them or they make us uncomfortable. Do I really believe that God is in control of everything? Yes. So then what does that mean for me? How then shall I live? How then do I walk knowing that what he has done is what he has done? If I start with that foundation, the things that I do take a lot more off my plate. Take a lot less anxiety as I constantly worry about things. I'm a warrior. I wrestle through anxiety, through things that I'm trying to hang on to, try to control. But if I go forward knowing that God is already doing something and he's already going to do something that's going to work for his benefit no matter what he wants, regardless of the circumstances in between, that takes a little bit off. It doesn't mean all of a sudden I'm like, oh great, my anxiety's fixed. But now my life is a little bit more oriented towards what God is doing. So Joshua came upon them suddenly, verse 9, having marched all night from Gilgal. So they marched all night long to get to Gibeon to defend the city. And here's what's so fascinating to me, because we often want to find, like, who's the hero of the story? Is it Joshua and his bravery, Joshua and his courage? No, the hero of the story is not Joshua, and this text is very clear about that. The hero of my life is not me. It's not any person. The hero of my life is what Jesus has done and what he is doing. And verse 10 says, and the Lord threw them, the Amorites, the 5 kings, into a panic before Israel, and who was struck them with a great blow at Gibeon and chased them away by the ascent of Beth Horon and struck them as far as Azekah and Makkedah. Again, all sorts of names, right? The Lord threw them into a panic. And as they fled before Israel's a part of this. It's not like they're sitting there watching. The Lord is doing this. God is doing this. And while they were going down the ascent, the Lord threw large stones from heaven on them as far as Azekah, and they died. And there were more who died because of the hailstones than the sons of Israel killed with the sword. So the Lord is literally saying, I got this. I got this. I don't need you to come out with faith and just be like, yep, we're going to do this, and if you have enough faith in me, it'll go well. The Lord's like, no, I will take care of this. Because this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to ordain. This is how I'm going to control it. You ever stop and think, what if I just let go and let God actually control what he says he controls? I think that's probably the scariest point for us in our life. At least for me it would be to be like, okay. That'd be kind of different. It'd change our perspective on life. And at that time, Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord gave the Amorites over to the sons of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon. Just so you know, I do not know if I'm pronouncing this correctly or not. But I'm saying them confidently, so you're like, yeah, okay, you're great. Joshua talks to the Lord. He prays. Hey, we're here. I see you're throwing hailstones. I see they're in a panic. And again, Joshua doesn't just stumble forward saying, yeah, God did it, and now I'm here. Okay, God, I got the rest of it. He's not foolish as that. He's not saying, hey, thanks God so much for this, and I'll take care of the rest of it. All the way through this, Joshua continues to go back to, is God in charge of this? Is God doing this? Is God who God is? And am I laying myself before that? Every instance through this, even when victory looks assured, when there are literally stones falling from heaven, killing the enemies for us, and not hitting the people of Israel, I would think that would be a confidence booster for me. But even through all of this, up until the very last minute, Joshua is going to God saying, now what? Now where should we go? Now where do we go? The enemy is routed. The enemy is dying. The enemy has been routed away and pushed away from Gibeon. Now what, Lord? When victory looks assured, where are you going still? Going back to again and again, because so often, at least in my life, I'm so apt to pray to God more when I am in trouble or when I need something. I mean, I think that's a fair thing to say, right? I'm very much more like, God, I need some supernatural help here. But when things are going great, okay, God, I'll tap you if I need you. Otherwise, I'm just going to plug along until we get here. But God's got so much more for that. He's got so much bigger plan for what is going on in life. I was reading, we'll get to Anne. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm just getting so excited about this. Verse 13. And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped. I was reading all sorts of stuff on this, and people, and I'm literally getting just upset because people are just like, oh, it was probably just a poetic version, and there was a comet that flew by, and that's why there was extra sun that day, or it was possibly an eclipse. I read that, and you guys have heard all about it in the news, right? Everyone's talking about an eclipse tomorrow. Have you guys ever heard any of those things? People are coming out saying, well, it's the rapture tomorrow because of the sun and it's crossing the other. I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of people trying to figure out and control what God is doing. The sun stood still. God, in ordained and being for His people and for His glory, paused the entire universe. Why is this something we want to try to explain around? God paused the universe and said, I am going to have this victory for my people. That is huge. Oh no, it was just a comet, it was just this, no. God can do what God wants. Did He not create everything? Do we not read in Colossians that everything in its being, all things move and have its being in Him? He sustains it. He created it. He's going to bring it to an end. He's going to bring it to completion. Oh, but in this meantime, God, I'll just explain it away. He paused it. I just think this is incredible. He did this miraculous thing. Why? So that His people can accomplish what He has set them out to do. He paused the universe. And we say, man, that's a big miracle. Man, that's phenomenal. What can God do? What can God do for His purposes in our life? We start thinking of all the applications, and I'm starting to think even more like, what was even a bigger miracle than this? We just finished it up. We were talking about it last week. Can you imagine that all of a sudden the day just goes on and on and on? The Amorites are like, is this day ever going to end? And God's like, nope. We are going to finish this out. Can you imagine the same type of thing on the cross, Friday afternoon? Jesus has been on the cross for days, and all of a sudden in the middle of the afternoon, pitch black. The sky goes black. Jesus breathes His final. The curtain is torn. The change in that. And yet at the same time, here we have God standing still. The light, the moon, so that people can accomplish what God has set them out to do. What's the bigger miracle than this? That God said, I will be flesh for you so that you will have life forever and ever with me. That is by far a greater miracle, a bigger miracle. Salvation for the world. Can He do that? And He does do that. This makes this look like peanuts when God says, I'm going to save humanity for myself. Is God in control? Yeah. Yeah, He is. And how does that change us? How does that change the way that we live? If we really start to apply that to my life, it's really changed the way that I look at things. I would worry about something, and I have to stop, and I have to pray, and I found that my prayers have changed. I'm not praying so much, God, please let me not be this. Please, God, show me who you are. I mean, those are great prayers, but now my prayers are, God, if you're in control, how do I live in the way that reflects that? How do I live in a way that shows that I'm believing that you are truly who you say you are? That I'm not trying to excuse things. I have learned to let go of more stuff. I've learned to let go of more fear. I've learned to let go of more control. Because I am so much about trying to make life easy and make life better for me. Not saying we can just let back and be like, hey, yep, I'm just going to walk outside and close my eyes and wander around, and wherever God leads me, He leads me. No, don't do that. That's you're going to get hit by a truck, okay? Use your common sense, but at the same time, as we walk through life, if God is who He says He is, what does that actually mean for how we live? It affects how I trust. It affects how I worry. It affects how I pray. It affects how I understand what God is doing. He is for us. That's an incredible thought. And He can make the universe pause. He can do whatever else He wants. Verse 14, and it says, there has been no day like it before or since. If you're thinking, well, we could just excuse it away, I'm pretty sure Joshua in the text goes out of his way to say this was miraculous. When the Lord heeded the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. So Joshua returned, and all of Israel with him, to the camp at Gilgal. Okay, you guys ready?